Hey, everybody out there in computer land. It's Aftermath on the Sportsnet YouTube with Nug Nargang, Jimmy Corderas, Anthony Corelli, and Kevin Mickey. And we've just heard word that WWE Hall of Famer and absolute legend Pat Patterson has passed away. So we're going to talk about some great memories of Pat Patterson. Now, my memories of Pat Patterson come, of watching wrestling. He was on commentary for a long time after his time in the ring. But I watched Legends House on the WWE network, and he was quite a star there. And then his whole story of coming out and his great book that he wrote. But I've always known that he sang My Way at karaoke. That was his big song. And last year during SummerSlam in Toronto, I got to do a comedy show with Dolph Ziggler and a bunch of friends. And Pat crashed and sang My Way. And seeing that live was amazing. I met him. He's wonderful. But I'm sure my stories of Pat Patterson singing karaoke are no comparison to two guys that worked with him very closely in the WWE. So, Anthony, I'm going to get started with you. What can you tell us about Pat Patterson?
Oh gosh. Okay. So My Way was actually the he had a particular play set that when he would go, he was big on going to cruises, and he would go to cruises and he'd start off with "What a Wonderful World" and get everyone's attention. And then he would, come back with something else, but he would finish with My Way. And by the end of the week, he always became a fixture on the cruise. And people would be like, we got to go to karaoke and see this guy again. And he's like, doesn't work there, but he became one of the most popular things on every cruise he went on just by, his energy. And he actually has a CD out called My Second Dream. And it's several songs that he's professionally, recorded and sang. And he gave one out to Mike Chioda. And we used to listen to it in the car all the time. I can't remember if I ever got one. I remember I told him I wanted one. He was going to bring me one, but I can't remember if I ever got it. But one of my favorite stories is we were in Montreal, and I know Pat, he left Montreal at very, very young. I believe he was 18. And, his father wasn't very accepting of him being gay, and he left and kind of wasn't a good situation. So he went back to Montreal in the summertime later in life to reconnect with his city. And so he'd be Miami, wintertime, Montreal, summertime. So we were there, we went to dinner, and I was with some judo friends, and I called Pat. I said, hey man, you free tonight? And he was just really touched that the younger guys want to hang out with the old guy. And so he was coming to dinner, and I told my friends, I go, okay, a gentleman's coming, and he's very interesting. He's loud, and they're like, okay. And like, because there's some crazy characters in judo as well. Anyhow, all of a sudden, you just hear Santino screaming as soon as he walks in the front door. He just doesn't ask where I am. He just starts screaming my name out loud. And these guys look at me, I'm like, he's here. He's really here. And he was, on fire that night at the table. And one of my friends, Ryan, who's from Swift Current, Saskatchewan, was sitting beside Pat. And Pat was going to go outside for a cigarette. So he gets up and he goes, that's it, I'm leaving. I've had enough of your amazing personality, and walks out. And the guy looks at me like, what did I do? What did I do? Not knowing that he was just going for a cigarette. And there's so many stories more than, one time I got my match cut, and I was a babyface at the time. So, this is on Raw, right? I got 3 minutes. And how are you supposed to tell a story in 3 minutes? He goes, forget the story. When you turn around to give your jacket, have the guy come and hit you from behind. You turn around, you duck it. Ha-cha-cha-ba-ba, ha-cha-cha-ba-ba, ha-cha-cha-ba-ba. He goes flying out the ropes. You fire up. The audience is going to be invested. And then you can get right to your match. And it's a way to cut out time. And I use that all the time. Whenever I was short for time, and I even teach that to students. If you're short for time, you want to have a high energy beginning of a match that makes sense, this is what you do. You turn around, the guy comes running, you duck one, light him up, clothesline him over the top rope, fire up, and all of a sudden you just cut your match time in half, and you can focus on the remaining. Everything he gave you was an absolute gem. He was like the cheat codes. He's a human cheat code. If this is what you're faced up, try this, do this. And never did anything ever fail when Pat gave you a tip. Yeah, I've been to karaoke, a lot of different bars with Pat, and it also never fails.
Yeah, he knew what worked. He knew what worked for an audience.
Yeah.
Kevin, what about you? What can you tell us about Pat Patterson?
I mean, for myself, this is coming from a fan's perspective. All the stories that I've heard of Pat, legendary. For me, though, I mean, my memories of Pat Patterson will be the fact that he's a very proud Canadian. He represented Canada well, never shied away that he was Canadian. He's the first ever Intercontinental Champion.
Yes.
He invented the Royal Rumble match. But most importantly, I think that he was a proud, accepted member of the LGBTQ community. And I think that's one of the greatest legacies to leave behind, particularly in an industry that in the past hasn't necessarily seen a lot of members of said community. And Pat Patterson was a trailblazer in that regard. And it's very easy to understand the effect that he left on everybody. I mean, just look at Anthony. I feel like Anthony could have told us 40 more stories there, and we would have been equally as entertained by
some of them are not
one
PG.
of them. Yeah, that'll be for Aftermath After Dark.
Yeah. Yes.
I've had Patterson, just truly an unbelievable human being by all accounts, and I can, from the two individuals who worked closely with him here, Anthony and Jimmy, it confirmed he was one of the greats in wrestling, one of the greats in life itself.
Absolutely, and I gotta set this up for Jimmy, because Jimmy, you've said so many times that without Pat Patterson, you would not have been a referee.
No, absolutely not. I had been working for Jack Tunney for a little while, and I saw Pat every 3 weeks, because they used to do television tapings. They do Poughkeepsie, New York every 3 weeks and tape Superstars, but Wrestling Challenge was taped in Brantford, Ontario at the Brantford Civic Center. So I would see Pat every 3 weeks. I was the guy who drove one of the mini buses, myself and Elio Zarlenga, and one of us would take the heels and the baby faces, and I'd usually make a couple of trips because I'd have to take the announcers and the agents as well, and Pat was both. And we got to talking in the van, and he wanted to know about me, the person, as opposed to like, who is the, and we connected. And after doing that for a little while, he finally went up to Jack and said, "Hey, Jack, we have the kid here. He drives everybody. He sits around, he waits. He does a few things for us during the show, but basically he's waiting for us to finish so he can take us all back to Toronto and stuff like that. Why don't we use him? We'll make him a referee." And of course, Jack says, "Well, do we want to smarten the kid up?" And Pat turns to Jack and goes, "He's in the locker room with the boys. He's hanging out. He's watching how much more do you want to smarten him up?" So then Pat just turned to me and said, "You know what? Go get yourself some black sneakers, black pants, a blue shirt, and a black bow tie, and carry it with you at all times. We are going to make you a referee." Wow. And if it wasn't for Pat, that may never have happened. And you talk about many stories, and you ask anybody who got the honor and pleasure and privilege of getting to sit under, you talk about learning tree. This is the biggest learning tree. He is Mr. Finish. You want an ending to a match, you go to Pat. Pat has just that brain for it, but he's also a bit of a clown and a bit of a ribber. Again, where do I begin here? The day before the infamous Survivor Series in Montreal, 97, we ended up going to a famous Montreal smoke meat shop that's on Saint Denis that everybody visit, and there's this huge lineup outside at 11:30 at night. And so we're standing in line, and myself, Chimmel, and Kyoto, and Larry, a couple other guys, and all of a sudden we hear from behind us, "Hey, look at these guy over there," and because Pat always talked in singular, and nothing was plural when he spoke.
S's are expensive.
Yes, exactly, because do this, they go banana,
Perfect.
And stuff like that. So we turn around, we look back, and there's Pat and Vince and Gerald Briscoe, and you know what I mean, and Bruce Pritchard, and we're like, "Oh yeah, okay guys, we got your spot up here." And Vince goes, "No, it's cool, guys." Vince, of all people, "No, it's cool, guys. We'll wait." Pat goes, "Are you kidding me? Let's go." So we let him in. What are you gonna do? You know what I mean? But one of the biggest ribs he pulled on me was I don't know if you remember the infamous referee strike when we did
Yeah.
and during the pay-per-view, I got pulled out of the ring and I got beat up a little bit by the other refs and stuff like that. But anyways, the next day at Raw, they want to shoot this shot of us in Vince's office and Vince making sure that everything is settled with the referees and stuff like that. So we're shooting the shot and Pat just turns and goes, you know, you got beat up yesterday. You don't look like you got beat up. I go, so what are we going to do? He goes, we'll put you in a sling and you work tonight with a sling. And I said, okay. He says, no, put it on your right arm. I said, but Pat, I'm right-handed. I'm not sure if I could even get a good rhythm and count with my left hand. Oh, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Like he knew it was like, but it was like, you know.
Oh my God! Did
other
you do
than
the
the
match with your left hand?
I had to referee a match with my left hand. Yeah, yeah. So you know, in the sling. But all that aside, you know, you talk about a guy who, I guess, again, words like icon, legend, and stuff like that just don't fit. There should be another category for Pat.
Yeah,
There are so many superstars today on Twitter and Instagram who are telling the world how much Pat Patterson meant to them. And it's young guys in NXT who met him, all the way to retired Hall of Famers, all across the board, men, women, everybody is saying how much Pat Patterson helped them. Even if it was just taking them aside to say one or two little things, Pat Patterson was instrumental in helping them understand this business better.
Yeah, I saw a match once with him, and it was, you know, I would hear coaches talk about it, and it was with Ted DiBiase Sr., and it was a match where you know, Pat was refusing to get in, and every time he'd come, he'd kind of duck under the rope, and young Ted DiBiase was a baby face, and eventually grabbed him, kind of bealed him in the ring, and had this little moment. But when Pat got so being that what's the word I'm thinking of, that kind of heel where you're over the top and like a clown, you know, when he got in control of the match during the heat, this evil, just horrible person came out and he got him down and his face changed. And I saw that change. And I've always talked about, I was always taught about this change, that when you can be a joking heel and you can be a over the top, you know, Gorgeous George type character, but when the time comes, you got to flick that switch and be the most ruthless SOB in the world. And he just did it one time where I go, that's what they're talking about. I get it. I don't need to imagine it. I just saw it happen. And, you know, I teach that. I seem to work a lot of Pat Patterson's teachings into my curriculum as a coach, because it's all like foolproof stuff. It just works. And Jimmy knows his joke. Hey, do you know who was asking about you?
Nobody.
Yeah. He'll do that like 10 times a day to like very and now, you know, as he got older, you had to play along and say, you know.
It's funny because when we ran into him at SummerSlam last year, and you know, we're in the back, and I see him, and he says, "Hey, how are you? Your name is again?" I'm like, "Oh my goodness!" He was just that funny. I remember one time Owen Hart, who was a big ribber, had the agents all had Halliburton briefcases, you know, those metal.
Yeah.
Which looks like the Money in the Bank briefcase today.
Yeah.
That's what the Money in the Bank briefcase was designed after, the Halliburton that the agents carried. But Owen they were in the production meeting before TV. I don't know. I'm assuming I didn't see it, but someone had taken Pat's briefcase and handcuffed it to one of the thin pipes in the rafters. And, you know, they come back from the meeting and right away, Pat coming out of the office, Owen, you know what I mean? And I'm thinking to myself, well, two of the greatest ribbers ever working each other.
That's fantastic. Well, thanks guys for sharing your memories of working with Pat, and for all of us here at Aftermath, rest in peace to the legend that was Pat Patterson.